I'm Rebecca, 32 years old, and I still remember how my heart pounded as I stood on my parents' doorstep last Christmas. After years of minimal contact, I was finally home, arms loaded with carefully wrapped gifts and my mom's favorite homemade apple pie. When the door swung open, instead of the warm welcome I'd imagined, my sister Megan stood there, her eyes cold as the December air. "We don't want you here," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. The presents nearly slipped from my trembling hands as my world shattered. Before I continue with what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about family betrayals that eventually lead to healing. Growing up in our quaint Connecticut town, our family seemed picture-perfect from the outside. My mom, Linda, was a high school English teacher, beloved by her students and known for her incredible Christmas cookies. Dad, Robert, worked as an engineer at the local manufacturing plant, coming home each night with stories and small trinkets he'd fashioned from spare parts. Our modest two-story colonial house on Maple Street was the center of my universe for 18 years. As the middle child between Megan and our younger brother Tyler, I often found myself caught in a strange familial dynamic. Tyler, for years my junior, was the baby of the family who could charm his way out of any situation with his quick wit and dimpled smile. But Megan, for years my senior, was a different story entirely. From my earliest memories, Megan viewed me not as a sister, but as competition. When I was 6 and received praise from my first-grade teacher for drawing, Megan ripped it up as soon as we got home, claiming I had copied her style. When I made the middle school volleyball team, she told her friends I only got in because the coach pitted me. Each accomplishment of mine seemed to diminish her in some way I couldn't understand. The summer before my sophomore year of high school, I won a statewide essay contest. The local newspaper featured a small article about it with my photo. That evening, Megan refused to sit at the dinner table with us. I found her later, crying in her room, screaming that I was trying to steal her spotlight before she left for college. My parents, rather than addressing her behavior, asked me to be sensitive to her feelings and not show off so much. This pattern continued through my high school years. When I was accepted to Northwestern University with a partial scholarship, Megan, who had attended the state college, told extended family members that I had manipulated my way in. My parents, always conflict-averse, would offer platitudes like "sisters will be sisters," or "she'll grow out of it eventually." At 18, I left for Chicago with mixed emotions, excitement for my future and relief to escape the constant tension. During my college years, I limited my visits home to major holidays and a week in the summer. Even those brief stays were punctuated by Megan's subtle digs, backhanded compliments, and occasional silent treatments. After graduation, I secured a position at a marketing firm in Chicago, putting down roots in the city I had grown to love. My visits home became even less frequent, perhaps twice a year at most. Phone calls with my parents were pleasant but surface level. We never discussed the elephant in the room, that one of their daughters seemed incapable of celebrating the other's happiness. 6 months before last Christmas, my dad suffered a minor heart attack. I immediately offered to come home, but Mom insisted it wasn't necessary. They had plenty of help, and Dad was recovering well. I sent care packages instead and called more frequently. During these calls, Mom mentioned how much they missed me and how nice it would be to have everyone home for Christmas. The conversations felt different, warmer and more genuine than they had in years. When Mom called in November to officially invite me for Christmas, I felt a surge of hope. "We want to have everyone together this year," she said. "It's been too long since we've all been under one roof." I asked about Megan, and Mom assured me that everyone's excited to see you. I spent weeks preparing for the trip. I carefully selected gifts that reflected thoughtful consideration of each family member: a first edition copy of Frost's poetry for Mom, a vintage model car kit for Dad, a sophisticated leather portfolio for Megan, who had recently been promoted at her banking job, and concert tickets for Tyler's favorite band. I baked Mom's favorite apple pie from scratch, using her recipe, but adding a touch of cardamom, a subtle enhancement I'd learned from my Chicago roommate. I cleaned my apartment, packed my nicest holiday outfit, and even got my hair trimmed. This visit would be different, I told myself. Perhaps Megan had finally outgrown her jealousy. Perhaps we could finally have the sister relationship I'd always longed for. The 8-hour drive from Chicago to Connecticut gave me plenty of time to rehearse conversations and imagine warm scenarios of family reconciliation. I pictured us laughing around the Christmas tree, sharing stories over hot cocoa, maybe even starting new traditions as the adults we'd become. By the time I pulled onto the familiar streets of my hometown, my heart was full of optimism and holiday spirit. Little did I know that the moment I would step onto that front porch would change my understanding of family forever, forcing me to confront not just my relationship with Megan, but the entire foundation upon which our family was built. After 8 hours on the road, I finally turned onto the familiar oak-lined street where I grew up. The neighborhood was transformed into a winter wonderland, with twinkling lights outlining rooftops and illuminated reindeer decorations dotting the snow-covered lawns. Our family home stood in the middle of the block, its red brick exterior adorned with the same white lights and evergreen wreath that had marked every Christmas of my childhood. I parked my car at the curb, taking a moment to check my appearance in the rearview mirror. The butterflies in my stomach felt like a mixture of excitement and apprehension. After gathering my bags of gifts and carefully balancing the pie container, I made my way up the shoveled pathway to the front door. The porch light was on, and through the frosted glass panels of the door, I could see the colorful glow of Christmas tree lights. Warm air escaped as I exhaled, creating small clouds in the frigid December evening. With my arms full, I used my elbow to ring the doorbell, hearing the familiar two-tone chime echo inside the house. I expected to see my mother's face appear, perhaps with Dad peering over her shoulder, both of them beaming at my arrival. Instead, the door swung open to reveal Megan, her tall frame blocking the entryway. She was dressed in a festive red sweater, her hair styled in an elegant updo I hadn't seen before. For a split second, before her expression changed, I thought she might welcome me. That hope vanished instantly as she assessed me from head to toe, her lips curling into a sneer. Her eyes, so similar to mine in color but lacking any warmth, narrowed as she leaned against the doorframe. "We don't want you here," she said flatly, crossing her arms. "Mom and Dad are too polite to say it, but I'm not. You can't just waltz back in after ignoring everyone for years and expect a happy family reunion." I stood frozen, the pie container suddenly feeling heavy in my hands. "What are you talking about? Mom invited me. We've been planning this for weeks." Megan laughed, a harsh sound nothing like the giggles we shared as children. "Of course she did. Mom feels obligated to include you, but we all know you don't really care about this family. You made that clear when you didn't even bother to come when Dad was in the hospital." "That's not true," I protested, my voice rising with desperation. "Mom said not to come, that everything was under control." I offered multiple times. From inside the house, I heard laughter and the clinking of glasses. I recognized my father's deep chuckle, my mother's melodic laugh, and Tyler's distinctive snort. But there was another male voice, unfamiliar yet somehow nagging at my memory. "Mom? Dad?" I called out, trying to peek around Megan's rigid form. "I'm here." Megan shifted her position, effectively blocking my view. "They're busy. We're in the middle of dinner, and frankly, your dramatic entrance isn't welcome. You always did have a knack for trying to make everything about you." "Please," I whispered, feeling tears beginning to form. "It's Christmas Eve. I drove 8 hours. Can I at least come in and say hello?" Her expression remained unmoved. "Maybe you should have called first. Or better yet, maybe you should have been part of this family for the past decade instead of pretending we don't exist until it's convenient for you." She began closing the door. "Merry Christmas, Rebecca. Drive safe back to Chicago." Before I could respond, the heavy wooden door closed firmly in my face. I stood there in shock, gift still in my arms, the pie growing cold in the winter air. Through the door, I could hear the muffled continuation of holiday celebration, the family gathering continuing without a pause at my rejection. In a daze, I returned to my car and placed everything in the back seat. Sitting behind the wheel, I couldn't bring myself to start the engine. Tears streamed down my face as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and texted both my parents. "I'm outside. Megan won't let me in. Please come to the door." Minutes passed. No response. I tried calling Mom's cell phone, then Dad's, then the house landline. No one answered. Through the living room window, I could see shadows moving, people gathering around what must have been the dining table. They were continuing their Christmas Eve dinner, as if I didn't exist. The reality of the situation slowly sank in. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate exclusion. My own family had allowed me to be turned away on their doorstep on Christmas Eve. As the temperature in my car dropped, I finally turned on the engine. I couldn't face the long drive back to Chicago in this emotional state, so I pulled up a hotel app on my phone and booked a room at the Holiday Inn Express on the edge of town. At least I wouldn't be sleeping in my car on Christmas Eve. The hotel room was generic and impersonal, decorated with a small artificial tree on the desk. I set my suitcase down and sank onto the bed, still wearing my coat. The contrast between my imagined family Christmas and this sterile room was overwhelming. I curled up on top of the covers, clutching a pillow to my chest, and sobbed until exhaustion finally pulled me into a restless sleep. Christmas morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through the cheap hotel curtains. For a moment, in the hazy space between sleep and wakefulness, I forgot where I was and why. Reality crashed back as I noticed the unfamiliar surroundings and felt the puffiness around my eyes from crying myself to sleep. I checked my phone. Still no messages or calls from my parents. The silence was deafening. Rather than continue to wallow in misery, I decided to try to salvage some semblance of a Christmas day. I ordered room service, overpriced pancakes and coffee, and turned on the television to fill the room with noise. As I picked at my breakfast, I scrolled through social media, more out of habit than interest. Friends' posts showed happy family gatherings, beautifully decorated trees, and smiling children opening presents. Each image twisted the knife deeper, but I couldn't look away. And then I saw it. A post from Megan from the previous evening, just around the time I'd been standing on our parents' doorstep. The photo showed our family dinner table. Mom and Dad on either end, Tyler looking uncomfortable on one side, and Megan beaming next to a handsome man with his arm around her shoulders. The caption read, "Perfect Christmas Eve with the people who truly matter. So blessed to have our newest family member, Jason, joining us this year. Hashtag family first, hashtag Christmas traditions." My fork clattered against the plate as I recognized the man beside my sister. Jason. My ex-fiancé Jason. The man I had dated for 3 years and been engaged to for another before our painful breakup 5 years ago. The room seemed to spin as fragments of memories flooded back. Jason and I had met in Chicago during my first year at the marketing firm. He was intelligent, ambitious, and seemed to adore me. We moved in together after a year, and he proposed on my birthday the following year. I had brought him home to meet my family twice, once for Thanksgiving and once for a summer weekend. Both visits had been tense, with Megan being uncharacteristically attentive to Jason, asking about his work, his interests, laughing at all his jokes. Our relationship had deteriorated in the months following the second family visit. Jason became distant, critical, and eventually confessed to falling out of love. The breakup had been devastating but clean. We divided our possessions, I moved to a new apartment, and we hadn't contacted each other since. And now here he was, sitting at my family's Christmas table, being introduced as the newest family member. The implications were staggering. How long had this been going on? Had there been overlap with our relationship? Did my parents approve of this bizarre situation? As I stared at the photo, trying to process this bombshell, my phone chimed with a text message. It was from my cousin Amber. "Is it true what Megan's saying about you? I can't believe you do that to your own family." My hands shaking, I called Amber immediately. She answered with hesitation in her voice. "Rebecca? Are you okay?" I wasn't sure if I should reach out, but some of the things Megan's been saying didn't sound like you at all. What has she been saying? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Amber's answer unraveled the entire web of lies. According to Megan, I had abandoned the family years ago, refusing to visit even when Dad was fighting for his life in the hospital. She claimed I had treated Jason horribly during our relationship, that I had been emotionally abusive and controlling. The story she'd crafted painted me as a selfish monster who had cut off contact with my loving family for no reason other than cold ambition. She told everyone you were invited for Christmas, but declined because you were too busy, Amber continued. Then last night, she posted that you showed up unannounced, made a scene, and left when you weren't immediately the center of attention. My chest tightened, as if being crushed. Not only had Megan stolen my place at the family table and started dating my ex-fiancé, but she had also systematically destroyed my reputation within the extended family. The calculated cruelty of it was breathtaking. None of that is true, I said, my voice cracking. Mom invited me weeks ago. When I arrived, Megan wouldn't let me in the house. She told me they didn't want me there and shut the door in my face. Amber was silent for a moment. That sounds more like the Megan I know, she finally said. She's always been intense about you. But Rebecca, she's been telling these stories for years, and your parents never contradicted her. Most of the family believes her version. I thanked Amber for her honesty and ended the call. Sitting in that sterile hotel room, surrounded by the hollow sounds of Christmas movies on TV, I felt physically ill. My head pounded, my stomach churned, and my hands wouldn't stop trembling. The betrayal wasn't just Megan's anymore. It extended to my parents, who had apparently allowed her to rewrite our family history with me cast as the villain. I needed answers, and I wouldn't get them hiding in this hotel room. I couldn't confront Megan directly. She had proven herself too skilled at manipulation. But perhaps my father, always the more reasonable parent, might listen if I could speak to him alone. I had to try. The alternative was accepting this twisted narrative as my new reality, and that was something I refused to do. After washing my face and changing into fresh clothes, I drove back to the family home. The Christmas Day streets were quiet, most families secluded inside their warm houses celebrating together. I parked a few houses down, not wanting to announce my presence immediately. Through the living room window, I could see the Christmas tree lights still twinkling, but no movement inside. I approached the house cautiously, rehearsing what I would say if Megan answered the door again. To my relief, when I knocked, it was my father who appeared. His expression upon seeing me was not the warm welcome I'd hoped for, but neither was it the outright rejection Megan had delivered. Instead, he looked conflicted. "Rebecca," he said flatly, "what are you doing here?" "Dad, please," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I need to talk to you. Just you. Can I come in?" He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder before reluctantly stepping aside. "Your mother and Megan took Jason to see the Christmas lights downtown. They'll be back soon." The living room was exactly as I remembered, though the Christmas decorations seemed more elaborate than in years past. Wrapping paper and opened gifts were scattered around the tree, evidence of a morning celebration I'd been excluded from. Dad gestured toward the couch but remained standing himself, creating an immediate power imbalance. "I don't understand what happened last night," I began. "Mom invited me weeks ago. We talked about it multiple times. Then I arrive and Megan says you all don't want me here?" Dad shifted uncomfortably. "Rebecca, you know how things have been. You've barely been part of this family for years. You didn't even come when I was in the hospital." "That's not true," I exclaimed, pulling out my phone. "Look at these texts. Mom specifically told me not to come, that everything was under control. I offered 3 separate times to fly back." Dad squinted at the screen, his brow furrowing as he read the exchanges. "That's not what Megan said happened." "I'm sure it isn't," I replied, trying to keep bitterness from my voice. "Dad, Megan is dating my ex-fiancé. Did you know that? Did you know Jason and I were engaged for a year?" A flash of discomfort crossed his face. "She said you dated briefly, that it wasn't serious." I pulled up old photos on my phone, Jason and me in front of our shared apartment, my hand displaying the engagement ring, us at family events. Does this look not serious to you? We lived together for 2 years. We were planning our wedding when we broke up. Dad sank slowly into his armchair, the weight of realization evident in his posture. I didn't know, he said quietly. Megan said. Megan has been lying to you, Dad, about a lot of things. I moved to sit on the ottoman near him, closing the physical gap between us. Remember when I was 10 and you taught me how to build that birdhouse for Mom's birthday? You said it was our special project because I was the only one patient enough to measure twice and cut once. A small smile tugged at his lips. You were always so careful with the details, even as a kid. And remember when we went fishing at Lake Winnipesaukee and I caught that enormous bass? You were so proud you took a photo and carried it in your wallet for years. I still have that picture, he admitted. It's in my desk drawer now. For the next 20 minutes, I reminisced about our shared memories, gradually reminding him of the connection we'd once had. The ice between us began to thaw as the real Rebecca, not Megan's fictional version, became present in the room. Our conversation was abruptly interrupted by the sound of car doors slamming. Dad tensed immediately. They're back, he said, suddenly looking nervous. The front door opened and my mother's voice called out, Robert, we're home. You won't believe the display at the Hendersons this year. She stopped short when she entered the living room and saw me sitting there. Behind her, Megan appeared with Jason close behind, his arm around her waist. The shock on their faces quickly transformed, Mom's into awkward discomfort, Megan's into cold fury, and Jason's into something like shame. What is she doing here? Megan demanded, addressing our father as if I weren't present. Megan, please, Mom said weakly. It's Christmas.
Exactly.
It's Christmas and she wasn't invited, Megan snapped. She shows up unannounced again, trying to ruin our holiday again. That's not true, I said, standing up. Mom invited me weeks ago. We discussed it multiple times. Mom's eyes darted nervously between Megan and me. I may have mentioned it would be nice to see you, but I didn't think you'd actually come. The betrayal in that moment was like a physical blow. You called me. You specifically asked me to come home for Christmas. You said everyone wanted to see me. Mom was just being nice, Megan interjected. She didn't think you'd actually show up after ignoring Dad's health crisis. I didn't ignore anything. Mom told me not to come. I turned to Jason, who was staring intently at the floor. And you? How long, Jason? How long after we broke up did you start dating my sister? Or was it before? Jason finally met my gaze, his expression a mixture of guilt and defiance. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that, Megan cut in. Jason reached out to me after you treated him so horribly. We connected over how difficult you are to deal with. Years of suppressed feelings erupted as I turned to my parents. Do you hear yourselves? Do you see what's happening here? Megan has been systematically turning you against me for years. She's dating my ex-fiancé, yes, fiancé, not brief boyfriend, and has convinced the entire extended family that I'm some kind of monster. That's enough, Rebecca, Mom said sharply. Megan has been here for us. She visits regularly. She helped her father through his recovery. She doesn't just show up when it's convenient and expect everything to revolve around her. I stayed away because every time I came home, I was treated like an intruder in my own family. My voice broke as tears started flowing. Do you have any idea what it feels like to be constantly compared, constantly found wanting, constantly pushed away by your own sister? And instead of addressing it, you both just let it happen. You enabled it. You chose the path of least resistance, which meant sacrificing your relationship with me. The room fell silent except for my ragged breathing. Dad looked torn, glancing between Megan and me with confusion evident on his face. Mom stood rigid, her arms crossed defensively. Jason continued to examine the carpet pattern with great interest. Megan broke the silence with a cold, calculated statement. It's her or me. I won't stay in this house if she's here. The ultimatum hung in the air like a toxic cloud. I looked at my parents, waiting for them to finally stand up to Megan's manipulation. Instead, my mother stepped closer to Megan and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Rebecca," Mom said quietly, "I think it would be best if you left. Today is supposed to be a happy occasion, and clearly, that's not possible right now." The finality of those words echoed in the sudden hollowness of my chest. My own mother was choosing peace with Megan over truth and reconciliation with me. Dad said nothing, his silence an endorsement of the decision. I gathered my coat and purse, moving as if underwater. At the door, I turned back one last time. "Merry Christmas," I said, my voice barely audible. "I won't bother you again." As I walked to my car, the weight of complete familial rejection pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. Once inside the vehicle, I gripped the steering wheel and let out a primal scream that had been building for decades, a sound of grief, rage, and final acceptance that the family I had longed for existed only in my imagination. I drove without destination or purpose, tears blurring my vision as familiar streets passed by in a haze. Eventually, I found myself at Riverside Park, where our family had spent countless summer picnics and winter sledding adventures. The playground was deserted on Christmas Day, dusted with fresh snow that sparkled under the afternoon sun. I sat on a swing, the same one I'd always chosen as a child, and pushed myself gently back and forth with the toe of my boot. The rhythmic creaking of the chains matched the pulsing ache in my chest. Here, in this place filled with childhood memories, I let the full reality of what had happened sink in. My family had rejected me, not because of anything I'd done, but because accepting Megan's version of reality was easier than confronting the truth. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Tyler's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Becca." His voice was tentative. "Where are you?" "Riverside Park," I replied, surprised by how hollow my voice sounded. "On the swings. Stay there. I'm coming to get you." 20 minutes later, Tyler's blue sedan pulled into the parking lot. My younger brother approached cautiously, hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, his breath visible in the cold air. At 28, he had our father's height and our mother's gentle features. I hadn't seen him at either confrontation with the family. "You weren't at the house," I observed as he sat on the swing beside me. "I moved out 3 months ago," he explained. "I only show up for the obligatory holiday appearances. Megan and we don't really get along anymore." I turned to look at him fully. "What happened?" Tyler sighed, his swing twisting slightly as he dug the toe of his boot into the snow. "The same thing that happened with you, just slower. Megan gradually pushed me out too. Once you were gone, she needed a new target." He gave a humorless laugh. "I wasn't at dinner last night. I came by this morning for the gift exchange, but left before you arrived. Amber called me about what happened." For the next hour, sitting on those cold swings, Tyler filled in the gaps of the past few years. How Megan had slowly isolated our parents from extended family members who questioned her narratives. How she had strategically taken over family decisions during Dad's recovery. How she had started dating Jason less than 6 months after my breakup with him, after deliberately seeking him out through mutual connections. She's created this alternate reality where she's the devoted daughter and you're the family villain, Tyler explained. And Mom and Dad find it easier to accept her version than to confront the uncomfortable truth. Which is that they failed you. That they allowed her jealousy and competitiveness to poison your relationship instead of addressing it when we were kids. Tyler kicked at the snow beneath his feet. It was easier for them to rationalize your distance as your choice rather than the result of their inaction. His understanding and validation were like a life raft in a stormy sea. For the first time since arriving in Connecticut, I felt seen and heard. "What now?" I asked, wiping away fresh tears. "Now," Tyler said, standing up and offering his hand, "you come have Christmas dinner with me and some friends who will be genuinely happy to see you." Tyler's apartment was a modest one-bedroom in a converted factory building downtown. When we arrived, his girlfriend Emma was in the kitchen, wearing an apron and singing along to Christmas music. The small space was filled with delicious aromas and the warm laughter of 3 other people setting a table that had clearly been expanded with card tables to accommodate everyone. "Everyone, this is my sister Rebecca," Tyler announced. The group turned with genuine smiles of welcome. "We've heard so much about you," Emma said, giving me a quick hug before returning to her cooking. "Tyler always says you're the one who taught him to stand up for himself." The contrast between this reception and my earlier rejection was stark. Here, among strangers who had no reason to welcome me except their affection for my brother, I was immediately accepted. There were no conditions, no historical grievances, no power plays, just simple human warmth. Throughout the evening, as we shared a slightly overcooked turkey and homemade sides, I found myself genuinely laughing for the first time in days. Tyler's friends, a mix of coworkers and college buddies, treated me like I belonged, drawing me into their inside jokes and holiday traditions. After dinner, while the others played a raucous board game, Tyler and I stepped out onto a small balcony with mugs of hot chocolate. "I'm sorry I didn't stand up for you more," he said quietly. "With Mom and Dad. With Megan. You were younger than me. It wasn't your responsibility." Still, I knew what was happening. I just didn't know how to fix it. We stood in companionable silence, watching our breath form clouds in the night air. "You know what I realized tonight?" I finally said. "Family isn't just about blood. It's about who makes space for you at their table without making you feel like you're taking up too much room." Tyler nodded, bumping his shoulder against mine in a gesture of solidarity we'd shared since childhood. "So, what's your plan? Heading back to Chicago tomorrow?" I considered the question, watching the twinkling lights of the town below us. "No," I decided. "I think I need to stay a little longer. Not to try to fix things with Mom and Dad or Megan. I'm not sure that's even possible right now. But I need to understand how we got here. I need to process this properly instead of running away." "You can stay with me," Tyler offered immediately. That night, sleeping on Tyler's lumpy sofa bed, I felt a strange sense of peace despite the day's trauma. I had lost the fantasy of my reconciled birth family, but I had found an ally in my brother and a model for what healthy connections could look like. As painful as the rejection had been, it had also been clarifying, revealing the true nature of relationships I had idealized for too long. For the first time, I began to envision a path forward that wasn't defined by seeking approval from people unwilling to give it. The realization wasn't a magical cure for the pain, but it was the first tentative step toward healing. Tyler and I spent the week between Christmas and New Year's strategizing and processing. Instead of rushing back to Chicago as I had initially planned, I extended my hotel reservation, creating a home base separate from Tyler's small apartment but close enough for daily connection. New Year's Eve arrived with a fresh blanket of snow. Tyler and Emma had invited me to a small gathering at their friend Mark's loft apartment. As midnight approached, surrounded by people who had quickly become temporary family, I made a resolution that felt different from the superficial promises of previous years. I resolved to reclaim my narrative and establish boundaries that protected my well-being, even if that meant permanently altering my relationship with my birth family. To new beginnings, Tyler toasted as the clock struck 12. The words resonated deep within me. The next morning, fueled by clarity and determination, I called my father and asked to meet him for coffee. To my surprise, he agreed, suggesting a small cafe away from the house, away from Megan's influence. Dad looked older than he had just a week ago, the lines around his eyes deeper, his shoulders slightly stooped. We sat across from each other, steam rising from our mugs, initial conversations stilted and cautious. "I've been thinking about what you said," he finally admitted after several minutes of small talk. "About Megan, about how things have been. I pulled out old photo albums after you left. There's a pattern I never noticed before." I waited, giving him space to continue his thought process. "In so many pictures, when you accomplish something, piano recitals, science fairs, graduations, Megan looks angry in the background. I never saw it then. Or maybe I didn't want to see it." He stared into his coffee. Your mother and I, we took the path of least resistance. Megan was always more volatile, more demanding. It was easier to ask you to accommodate her than to confront her behavior. It was wrong, Dad, I said gently. It taught me that my feelings mattered less than keeping the peace. It taught Megan that her behavior had no consequences. He nodded slowly. I see that now. Tyler stopped by yesterday. He told me Megan has been isolating us from the extended family. Is that true? When was the last time Aunt Susan visited? Or Uncle Jim? When did you last go to the family reunion in Vermont? Dad looked startled. It's been years. Megan always said they were too busy, or that they didn't really want to see us but felt obligated. Have you ever called them directly to verify that? The realization dawned visibly on his face. No, he admitted. We just took her word for it. Over the next hour, I shared examples of Megan's pattern of isolation and manipulation, careful to focus on observable facts rather than emotional accusations. Dad listened with increasing concern, occasionally offering his own examples once he began to see the pattern clearly. What about Jason? He finally asked. Were you really engaged? I showed him the same photos I'd shared during our confrontation, this time adding context and timeline. We were together for 4 years, engaged for the last year. The breakup was sudden and painful. I had no idea he'd connected with Megan afterward. 2 days later, I arranged to meet Jason at a coffee shop near his office. He arrived looking nervous, constantly checking his phone as if expecting Megan to call. She doesn't know I'm meeting you, he admitted after ordering his drink. She'd be furious. Why are you with her, Jason? I asked directly. After everything we shared, how could you date my sister? He had the decency to look ashamed. It wasn't planned. After we broke up, I was in a bad place. Megan reached out, said she wanted to check on me since you, and she weren't speaking much. She was sympathetic, understanding. It started as friendship, but it became more. Yes. He hesitated. Rebecca, there's something you should know. Megan, she sought me out. She found my new office address and started showing up for accidental meetings months before she reached out directly. She pursued you deliberately because you were my ex, I stated, seeing the truth clearly. Jason nodded uncomfortably. I realized it too late. By then, we were already involved, and when I tried to pull back, she threatened to tell her version of events to everyone we knew professionally. He looked up. It's not the first time. She told me about other boyfriends of yours she's tried to connect with over the years. The conversation confirmed what I had already begun to suspect. Megan's actions weren't just about Jason specifically, but about taking what was mine, regardless of what it was. The pattern had existed since childhood, but had escalated to this most intimate betrayal. That evening, I met with a family therapist Tyler had been seeing Dr. Abrams. Though she couldn't offer specific insights without meeting my entire family, she helped me understand the dynamics of narcissistic family systems and the role each member plays in maintaining the dysfunction. What you're describing is unfortunately common, she explained. One child becomes the golden child, whose emotional needs dominate the family system, while another becomes the scapegoat, who is blamed for family problems and whose needs are minimized. So, what do? I asked. I can't change them. No, you can't, she agreed. But you can set boundaries that protect your well-being, communicate your truth clearly, and decide what kind of relationship you're willing to have under these circumstances. Taking her advice, I spent an entire day crafting a letter to my parents. I wrote about my experiences growing up as Megan's sister, about the pattern of having my needs and feelings dismissed, about the pain of being excluded, and then blamed for the distance that exclusion created. I explained that I was setting new boundaries. I would no longer participate in family events where Megan was empowered to dictate who belonged and who didn't. I would no longer accept being cast as the villain in a story created to protect them from confronting uncomfortable truths. I delivered the letter in person, asking them to read it after I left rather than in my presence. Mom called the next day, her voice defensive and hurt, insisting I had always been too sensitive and that I was making mountains out of molehills. Dad, however, called separately, his tone more reflective. He didn't agree with everything in my letter, but he acknowledged that there were patterns in our family that had hurt me and that he regretted his role in them. It wasn't the full recognition I had hoped for, but it was a start, a small crack in the facade of family mythology that Megan had constructed. The most surprising development came from Tyler. Over dinner at his apartment, he announced that he had applied for a transfer within his company to their Chicago office. "I need a fresh start," he explained, "and I want to be closer to you. We've lost too many years already." My final act before leaving Connecticut was the most difficult. A direct conversation with Megan. I suggested meeting at a public park, knowing a neutral location would minimize the chance of dramatic scenes. To my surprise, she agreed. She arrived bundled against the January cold, her expression guarded but curious. We walked along the frozen pond where we had ice skated as children, the conversation initially stiff and formal. "Why did you want to see me?" she finally asked. "To tell me how I've ruined your life?" "No," I replied calmly. "I wanted to understand. We grew up in the same house with the same parents. We had the same opportunities. Yet somehow, you've spent your life trying to erase me or replace me or become me. I just want to know why." Her laugh was bitter. "That's such a Rebecca question. Always the psychologist, trying to analyze everyone." "I'm not analyzing.
I'm asking."
Sister to sister. Something in my tone must have reached her because her defensive posture faltered momentarily. "You were always the special one," she said quietly. "The smart one, the talented one, the one everyone admired. Do you have any idea what it's like to grow up in that shadow?" "I was never trying to cast a shadow, Megan. I was just trying to exist alongside you. It didn't feel that way." She kicked at a frozen clump of snow. "Every time you succeeded at something, it felt like you were taking something from me. That's not how life works. My happiness didn't come at your expense." "Easy for you to say." Her walls came back up, eyes hardening. "You always get the sympathy, don't you? Poor Rebecca, with the mean sister. Never poor Megan, who was never enough in her own home." In that moment, I saw clearly the wound at the center of Megan's behavior, a profound sense of inadequacy that no amount of external success could heal. It didn't excuse her actions, but it helped me understand them. And in understanding, I found the beginning of release. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness, and I'm not offering mine right now," I told her as we completed our circuit of the pond. "But I am stepping away from this dynamic. I won't participate in it anymore. What happens next is up to you and Mom and Dad." As I prepared to return to Chicago, I visited our old family home one last time. Dad was there alone, and we spent an hour going through old photographs and mementos. I selected a few meaningful items: my grandmother's recipe book, a small painting I'd made in high school that Mom had framed, a carved wooden box Dad had made for my 10th birthday. "You're really leaving, aren't you?" Dad asked as I carefully wrapped each item. "I'm going back to my life," I corrected gently. "But I'm leaving the door open, just a crack. If things change, if you and Mom ever want a different kind of relationship, one based on reality rather than Megan's version of it, you know where to find me." The goodbye was bittersweet, acknowledgement that while blood connected us, true family connection required much more than shared DNA. As I drove away from the house for what might be the last time, I felt a mixture of grief for what might have been and hope for what still could be, if not with my parents, then with the family I would continue to build for myself. 6 months after that fateful Christmas, my life in Chicago had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. The spacious 2-bedroom apartment I'd moved into shortly after returning from Connecticut now had Tyler's running shoes by the door and his health-conscious cereals in the pantry. His transfer had been approved in February, and by March, he had become my roommate, bringing new energy and connection to my daily life. The initial weeks back in Chicago had been difficult. I'd return from work to an empty apartment and find myself crying without warning, mourning the family I had hoped to reconcile with. But gradually, with therapy and the support of friends who became more like family, the acute pain transformed into something more manageable, a dull ache that occasionally sharpened but no longer threatened to consume me. Tyler and I established new traditions. Sunday brunches at the corner cafe, monthly movie marathons, surprise takeout dinners when one of us had a rough day. We talked more openly than we ever had growing up, processing our shared childhood experiences and supporting each other's healing journey. My relationship with my parents evolved into something limited but structured. Mom remained largely defensive, though she did send birthday and holiday cards with brief, surface-level notes. Dad, however, had begun to reach out more meaningfully. He called every other Sunday, our conversations initially awkward, but gradually warming as we established new patterns of interaction. "I found some of your old drawings in the attic," he mentioned during one call in May. "From that summer art camp when you were 13. They're really good, Becca. I never really looked at them properly before." These small acknowledgments of my existence and value, though long overdue, helped heal old wounds. Dad visited Chicago in June, staying at a nearby hotel, but spending most days with Tyler and me. Without Mom or Megan present, he seemed more relaxed, more willing to engage authentically. We took him to our favorite spots around the city, creating new memories to stand alongside the complicated ones from our past. During his visit, Dad shared that he had reconnected with his brother, my Uncle Jim, whom he hadn't spoken to in years due to what he now recognized as Megan's interference. "Jim never said those things about you that Megan claimed," Dad admitted. When I finally called him directly, he was confused. "He's always asked about you, sent Christmas cards that apparently never made it to you." The revelation confirmed what I had suspected, that Megan's campaign to isolate and diminish me had been even more extensive than I'd realized. But instead of reopening wounds, this knowledge strengthened my resolve to move forward rather than remain trapped in a cycle of family dysfunction. My professional life flourished as well. Freed from the emotional drain of seeking approval I would never receive, I channeled my energy into creative projects at work, earning a promotion to creative director in April. My team celebrated with me at a rooftop bar, their genuine joy in my success a powerful reminder of what healthy support looked like. Through a work event in late spring, I met Daniel, a kind-eyed architect with a quick wit and a talent for truly listening. Our relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and clear communication. When I finally shared my family story with him, his response was everything I needed. No platitudes, no awkward attempts to find silver linings, just genuine empathy and understanding. "Family systems are complicated," he said, having experienced his own challenges with a father who struggled with addiction. "But they don't define your worth or your capacity for connection." By summer, I had joined a support group for adults from dysfunctional family systems. The biweekly meetings provided a space where my experiences were normalized rather than dismissed, where strategies for setting boundaries were shared and refined, where the complicated grief of family estrangement was understood without judgment. The hardest part, I shared during one session, is accepting that the reconciliation I wanted might never happen. That my mother might never acknowledge the role she played, that Megan might never see me as anything but competition. Acceptance doesn't mean approval, the group facilitator reminded us. It means recognizing reality as it is, not as we wish it were, so we can make decisions based on truth rather than hope. As fall approached, bringing thoughts of the holiday season ahead, Tyler and I began planning what we called our Chosen Family Christmas, an open house celebration for friends, colleagues, and anyone else who needed a place to belong during the holidays. We created invitations, planned menus, and discussed decorations with the enthusiasm of children, reclaiming the joy that family celebrations should bring. After much consideration, I sent invitations to our parents as well, with a clear note: "You are welcome in our home if you can respect our boundaries." This is a drama-free celebration where everyone is valued equally. No Megan, no Jason. Please let us know if you can join us on these terms. Dad called immediately to accept. Mom sent a non-committal response about needing to see how things develop. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, a new foundation upon which something healthier might eventually be built. As I prepared for this new chapter, I received an unexpected letter from my mother. Unlike her usual cards with generic messages, this was several pages long, handwritten in her distinctive script. She didn't apologize directly, but there were acknowledgments I never thought I'd hear. I realize now we didn't protect you the way we should have, and your father and I took the easy path too often. The letter ended with a request rather than a demand. I would like to try to understand your perspective better. If you're willing, perhaps we could talk more openly next time we speak. It wasn't everything, but it was something, a small crack in the wall that had seemed impenetrable for so long. Whether it would lead to meaningful change remained to be seen, but for the first time, I felt hopeful without being naive about the possibilities. The journey from that Christmas doorstep rejection to my current life had been painful, but ultimately transformative. The family I had now, some related by blood, others by choice, was built on mutual respect and genuine care rather than obligation or manipulation. The boundaries I had established protected my well-being while leaving space for growth and change. The narrative I reclaimed acknowledged both the pain of the past and the possibility of the future. Standing on my balcony one evening, watching the sunset paint the Chicago skyline in gold and crimson, I reflected on the strange gift that Megan's cruel rejection had ultimately been. In pushing me away so completely, she had forced me to find my way back to myself, to define family on my own terms, to recognize my worth independent of others' validation, to build connections based on love rather than history or DNA. Family, I had learned, wasn't something you were simply born into. It was something you created through intention, care, and mutual respect. Sometimes it included blood relatives, sometimes it didn't. What mattered was not the labels or the shared genetics, but the space created for each person to be fully themselves, fully valued, fully loved. What about you? Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? Has someone's rejection ultimately led you to something better? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you found value in my journey, please like this video, subscribe to hear more stories of healing and growth, and share with someone who might need to know they're not alone in navigating difficult family dynamics. Thank you for being part of my chosen family today. Remember, sometimes the family we create is more powerful than the one we were born into.